If you are new to our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Garden Radio Show with your hosts, Joey and Holly Baird.
Well, there's problems that we deal with all the time in the garden, and we go over this each week. We seem like we tackle another issue, and we're going to talk about slugs. Here in the Milwaukee area and many parts of the country, we've had a tremendous amount of rain, and that encourages the good old, not friendly, and enemy to the garden slug, to come from wherever they live at and start devouring and damaging our garden. Now, first of all, what does a slug do, Holly, and why is it so devastating to our plants that we have growing?
Well, slugs are beneficial to the ecosystem that they live in. It's just
because they feed the animals that eat them?
Yeah, actually that's why.
Okay.
They feed the birds and mammals and whatnot that eat the slugs.
They're on the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They're an important part of the food chain. But they also do decompose things like worms do a little bit, so that's beneficial. But when they are too many, that becomes a problem because they eat your plants, and we definitely don't want that. So if you have a healthy balance of slugs, that's okay. Like maybe a few or whatever, and they're not overtaking your garden, that's okay. But then like when they start overtaking,
and we saw it last week when we was harvesting potatoes, which was a horrible experience because we had problems with potatoes, but we saw a lot of slugs just digging the potatoes up. Mm-hmm. They're just in the soil.
Yeah.
Floating around.
Literally.
So
you can get rid of them.
You can do a chemical application or you can do an organic application. Now, true enough, chemicals are not what we encourage in the garden, but they are sometimes that I will say based on a person's problem and extension, the largeness of the problem, I guess, the severity of the problem, you might need to use that chemical application in order to get things back into check. So then you can transfer over to using a organic means of control.
Right. So slugs are obviously problematic. You can use pesticides. Harmful pesticides, things like that. If that's your choice, that's fine. There's a number of them on the market. Go to any garden center, big box store, they'll have something for you. Mm-hmm. Dealing with them organically, there's a lot of different things you can do.
And we have done several of these. We had slugs very bad in the garden, the front yard garden a couple of years, last year I think it was, 2 years ago, maybe both, last year. And we did do the first one that we're going to talk about.
Right. So beer in cups. And that doesn't mean you just take your cup of beer and put it outside. You have to bury it at ground level. And
what happens, you want the hoppiest beer that you can get. If you have old beer, that's even better. If you like alcohol, get your neighbor's beer and use it.
No, but it's true. Something like an Oktoberfest beer wouldn't work, but an IPA would work because it's hoppier.
A higher IPA?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what is occurring here that is so effective in luring these slugs into the beer when you're putting in the cup and burying the cup ground level?
Well, they must like it. I don't know. They like the taste of it.
The smell?
The smell, yeah. So what they'll do is then they'll go to the smell and they fall in and they drown.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a slug trap. You have some drunk slugs.
Now, what happens is the problem that some people do, they go ahead and utilize this method of slug removal, but they put the cup where the problem persists, like right next to the tomato plant or the pepper plant. Where the problem.
You want to put them like in a corner away from that.
So the smell will lure them away from the plants that they're affecting, and then they'll fall into the beer. And you'll get hundreds of slugs. Now, the problem when you have with this is when it rains, it dilutes the beer, and you have to reapply or put new beer into that cup. But it does work. But again, we want to put it away from the issue to lure the slugs away. Another way is
you can use organic pesticides. Mm-hmm. They do sell those on the market.
There's a lot of great companies that provide that type of product.
Now, the next three are stuff you could sprinkle around your garden that they don't like crawling on.
Because the abrasiveness.
It's abrasive. They have the smooth bellies that they slug around on, and they don't like the abrasiveness.
Not 100%, but can be effective if done relatively according to the book or recommendations online, because of the abrasiveness. So it's not always 100%, but it will deter enough, I think, that it will work. So what are some of these in which we can do?
Coffee grounds.
Okay.
crushed up eggshells, and sand. So coffee grounds and crushed up eggshells, great for your soil, great for your garden. Sand is not necessarily great for your garden. It's not terrible. Just you don't want to use a lot of it.
Right. Not an abundance of sand.
Like don't go dumping, playground sand all over your garden.
The other thing is, what you can also do is pull the debris away from the base of the plants in which they are problematic, because that debris, the leaves, the pine needles, the grass clippings, they kind of use that as camouflage. And when you expose the soil and 2 or 3 inches around the base of the plant, they feel unsecure, and it kind of acts as a natural repellent, because they don't want to crawl across the soil to get to the plant, because they're exposed to the environment. They don't blend in with the surrounding as nearly as well as if they're in leaves or pine needles or dried grass clippings, that type of thing. And then you got the people will use copper wire or copper strips that supposedly will gently shock the slug and repel it. Some people say they have phenomenal success with it. Other people say they don't. There are some methods out there. I believe that they're like you hook up to a battery and it will emit a small electrical shock to the slugs and repel them. I don't know. We've never experienced to that level. So they put it around the top of the raised bed. So when the slugs,
we just had a comment come in.
Okay.
Saying that they like the malty part of the beer too.
Okay.
So that's part of the whole fermentation process.
Right.
Right. So anyway, the copper wire. Were you saying that?
Yeah, the copper wire. Okay. Yeah, I got that.
They also sell slug tape, which is made of copper.
Okay.
So
and it's supposed to repel them because of the shock.
Yeah, they get shocked by it.
Yeah.
And then there's good old diatomaceous earth that's used for a number of problems. And regarding insects, I don't know how effective it is. Supposedly it is effective. You would just sprinkle that around the plants.
Right. And there are also, it's edible. There's edible versions of that as well for human consumption. But the chemical application, let's talk about that for a moment.
I just want to talk about one thing.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So salt.
Okay.
It's kind of harmful to them because it's like their kryptonite.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put salt around your plants, it basically causes them to like melt or something.
Dehydrate.
Yeah, dehydrate.
It pulls the moisture from the slug.
Yeah.
And you want more of a fine granular salt so they can slide over it enough to where it gets them and they can ingest it and that type of thing.
Right.
So, yeah. So those are some organic means. Chemical applications, there are, as we talked about, many, many different type of chemical applications. Now, if you're going to go the chemical application route, you want to follow the recommended rates on the back of the package, because just because a little means good doesn't mean a lot is better. You want to also realize that most of the chemical applications are non-selective. That means that when you apply that particular chemical to your garden, whether it's for slugs or fill-in-the-blank problem, it's going to affect the good bugs as well.
And I think that's important because people don't realize that they're trying to get rid of one issue, but it could cause other issues and snowball.
And if the slugs are ingesting this chemical, it problematically could be the next animal in line that eats the slug can ingest the slug that contains the chemical in which killed it, and now that animal is now infected to some degree, or it can kill that animal as well. Now we're getting down to the very root of organic and being friendly with the earth and environmentally conscious and all that. But it can affect, it's a domino effect. When one thing happens, and we see this with on a global scale, when one domino falls, it affects things down the line.
Well, just right now, okay, so we had no rain basically in July and most of August, and then mid to end of August we got a lot of rain. And you know what happened is we got floods.
Right.
And you think the rain would be good with being that dry, but what happens is the earth can't absorb it as much as we were getting. And so that's how we get the flooding. And then on top of that, now we're being bombarded with mosquitoes because we got all that flooding. Because the water's laying there, because the soil's not absorbing it up as quick as it needs to. So that's just like this. You know, you have to think kind of outside of your backyard, so to speak.
So with that being said, if you got slugs, there's some simple solutions that you can resolve them with. Thank you for checking out the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show. For more, go to the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for full-length in-studio video and podcast replay of Season 1. Season 2 underway and added weekly. Tweet us at TWVG Show or hashtag TWVG to be part of the program.